Does your autism spectrum child have trouble with their hygiene? This is a pretty common problem for kids and teenagers on the autism spectrum, and in today's video I'm just going to give some suggestions on how to help them with that. One of the things to remember is that this is a very natural result of some of the ways that your child might think about the world. So, for instance, most autism spectrum children and adults are not really into fashion and fads. They're not as invested as neurotypicals are in what other people think of them. You know, they're often as well fairly logical about some of these things and think, well, if you really looked at the importance of like different qualities of a person, you know, why would it really matter whether they've combed their hair or not? You know, and there's some pretty decent truth in some of those observations. However, we also know that if autism spectrum children or teens learn to develop some good hygiene routines, that things are just going to go better for them socially, because there is that expectation in our society that we're going to take some effort to put into our appearance, and that we're going to try to make sure that we don't have food in our teeth, and we're going to try to smell good, and we're going to try to, you know, comb our hair. And that for people who don't do those things, they just don't get as much social acceptance. So if a child or teenager can develop some hygiene routines that will work for them throughout their lives, then they may experience more social acceptance on that front. So I think it's worth working on it, and it's also just a health issue as well. You know, if someone's clean and their teeth are brushed and so forth, they're going to be healthier. So, you know, there's some good reasons to try to work on it. And so here are some tips on how to do it. I think one of the first things to look at is to have some different kinds of visual supports in place. One thing that I like to suggest is a checklist of things that need to be done as part of the hygiene routine, and then laminate it and put it in the bathroom. So that it's easily visible to the child. They don't have to carry something around with them. It's just left right there in the bathroom. I just discovered myself that you can get a laminator for a pretty cheap price of around $30 or so. So it might be worth investing in that if you have a child on the autism spectrum, because there's a lot of different visual supports and checklists and so forth that you could laminate for your child. But of course the lamination is especially important if you're putting it in the bathroom, so that it doesn't just get wet and not be useful after one or two times. So the schedule in the bathroom might include all the different steps that need to be done. You know, so for some children, the level of specificity might vary. So you might have one child that might just say brush your teeth and wash your face and put on deodorant and wash your hands. For another child, it might also include things like wash the toothpaste out of the sink, or put the lid back on the toothpaste. So for some kids that wouldn't get all of the different steps involved in brushing your teeth, you might have to spell out those specific steps that would be involved, so that by the end, not only have they completed their hygiene routine, but they've picked up after themselves somewhat in the bathroom, so that would be a plus. And also remember, as with any kind of visual support, that this could be a checklist that is written in words for a higher functioning child who can read really easily and just at first glance can look at it and know exactly what they're supposed to do. Or for a nonverbal child, or for a child who doesn't read that quickly, you might use pictures instead, which could be clip art, or it could be photos that you've actually taken of the specific items, or even of the child completing those tasks. So a visual support is, you know, one of the first ways to go. And again, as I often talk about visual supports, checklists, and that kind of thing, you might tie it into their reward system. So if a child completes the different items on their hygiene checklist, they might be earning some kind of reward, which could be, you know, some kind of prize or reward that costs money. It could be something that costs you a little time, of something you would do that's special with them, maybe play a game with them or something that they wouldn't otherwise get. Or it might be a privilege that they would earn that again, they wouldn't otherwise earn if they didn't complete their hygiene checklist. So there's various ways to set up your reward system for that. Another way to look at some kind of visual support for hygiene is to set up 2 different baskets. I mean, there might be sort of plastic basket in the bathroom where you put all the items one uses for your hygiene routine in one basket, and then as you use it, you move it over to the other basket. So for instance, the toothbrush and toothpaste and a washcloth or soap or deodorant, or comb or hairbrush might all be put in the basket. As the child uses one item, they move it over to the other basket until everything's moved over. Then the next time they use it, they just do it in reverse. Or if that's too confusing for the child, you would go in and move the basket so that they know to do that. And that's partly because some kids on the autism spectrum, because this is not something that's usually a high priority to them, they often might not remember, did I do that or didn't I? You know, they're not always sure which parts of it they've done. Or even if they can remember, once they've used something in the basket, they, again, they might not be that motivated, so just going through that process of moving it from one to the other, helps them so to keep structured and keep on task with the project. You can also consider taking a picture of your child when they have completed all those steps. Now, this probably only works maybe around the hair or something, but it sort of shows a picture of a well-groomed child, your child in particular, and you might want to put that there as a reminder of what they're supposed to look like, when they've completed all the steps of their task. I wouldn't suggest putting up a picture of how they look when they're not well-groomed, just because that might not reinforce what it is you're trying to accomplish. You could also use some video modeling on this. So for instance, let's say you want your child to go through a 5-step hygiene routine. You could take a video of them doing it well. Again, I wouldn't do a video of them doing it not so well, but try to get them to role play, doing a good job on their hygiene routine, and then watching it, sort of like a video social story. So it sort of shows them what it is that they're supposed to do, and then they could have some fun, maybe showing it to some other family members, or one family member could take it and the child could enjoy showing it to someone else in the family, on how they did. And then by seeing it over a number of different times, that helps them learn their routine, is being able to watch themselves doing what it is that you're wanting them to do and doing it well. Now, one thing I just suggest watching for when you're doing any reward system based on the hygiene routine is that some autism spectrum kids get really good at trying to beat the system. So for instance, let's say part of their routine is they're supposed to shampoo their hair. Now, I've known some kids that'll just put like a tiniest dab of shampoo on one spot in their head and then rinse it off because they don't want to go through all the effort of soaping up their heads and then rinsing it off. And then because they've learned that their parents might do some kind of sniff test to see if they use the shampoo. And then they'll sort of point to that spot, oh, sniff, you'll be able to tell that I washed my hair. So, usually as a parent, you're going to be able to tell if their hair actually looks clean and not just wet, or if their teeth actually look like they've been brushed and there's not just the tiniest bit of toothpaste smell in their mouth. So you want to make sure that when you give your reward for it, that the child has actually completed the different steps and isn't trying to find some way out of the effort involved. Because that's really the big obstacle for kids on the autism spectrum to the hygiene routine. They have to put quite a bit of effort into it, in their opinion, especially compared to what they'd rather be doing instead. So most kids on the autism spectrum are going to have a preferred activity that they'd much rather be doing rather than spending 5 or 10 minutes in the bathroom, brushing their teeth and hair and putting on deodorant. The last thing I'd like to suggest on this is I think that the earlier you start a routine that will work in adulthood, the better. So for instance, let's say you have a young child and it's such a hassle to give them a bath and all that because of how they don't like to get a bath. You're only doing it a couple of times a week. Now, by the time they're getting towards junior high school age and certainly into adulthood, it's going to be a lot better for them if they're showering or bathing every day. And so the sooner you move to the thing that will work for them in adulthood, the better, because then you have several years of daily practice while they're still with you to get into the habit that will work for them as an adult. And if they're living on their own as an adult and they're in that routine, this is what I do every day when I get up, or this is what I do every day before I go to bed for my hygiene, then the chances are better that they'll continue that routine once they're an adult and living independently, because that's just what they do. And that really works well for a lot of people on the autism spectrum, is just to get into those habits as soon as possible. And for instance, instead of trying to be in one habit for several years and then try and change it to something else later, it can be more constructive to early on try and get in a habit that would work for a lifetime, perhaps. And so those are some different suggestions for working on the hygiene routine. If you have any other ideas about this, please feel free to post some comments for other viewers so that they can learn from some things that have worked for you. My name is Barbara Lester. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I have almost 30 years of experience working with children and adolescents. Thanks for stopping by, and if you like this kind of assistance, I just suggest that you subscribe to my channel on YouTube, which is ASD Specialist. See you next time.